Mike Tollin is an Academy Award nominated filmmaker for his documentary on Hank Aaron, a 3-time Emmy Award winner. And among his
wow.
And this was Mike Tollin, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, maybe. Just wanted to do something. Last week when we had the city controller on, I revealed that growing up, her nickname was Becky, and she was mortified. So I was searching for something to show of Mike. I like the plaid jacket, Mike.
Yeah.
The
70s.
Go ahead.
70s. Right. High fashion, circa 1977.
Yeah, it's got a real Harry Callis flavor to it. That style choice. So I just want to. Some of you have seen his movies, Coach Carter, radio, TV shows like Smallville. The show that was way ahead of its time, Arliss on HBO, which is fun to look back at now, and everything that he was parodying then has come to pass, is now reality. And for those of us who are really familiar with the Tolan body of work, the great documentary as part of the 30 for 30 series, Small Potatoes, which he was the first to realize and tell us all that Donald Trump was a fraud. So if you haven't seen that, it's how Donald Trump decimated the United States Football League. So with all that, let's get to Michael Tollin. Thanks for joining us, Mike, from the left coast.
Yeah, nice to be with you, virtually anyway. We've done this a few times through the years, so I like it. Makes me feel at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to your home because your home plays a role in the series. First of all, did you expect this? You've created something that is getting like Super Bowl level ratings and buzz. How much of this was a surprise to you?
A lot. It's convenient and humble to say, oh, beyond my wildest dreams. But this is truly beyond any of our wildest dreams. And it's a confluence of events, let's face it. However good the show is, and I think Jason Hare, the director, is immensely talented, and I'm super proud of it. So this is not an apology. It's an acknowledgement, though, that a lot of forces have to be at work, like the complete absence of sports programming, like people shut in, desperate for some distraction, source of joy, something that might bring a family together. It's overwhelming. And we went into this hurry up offense. It was originally slated to launch on June 2nd, which made sense. It would have been right in the middle of the NBA Finals, a good adjacency, great promotional platform. When Rudy Gobert, it all goes back to Rudy, one positive test followed by another among the Utah Jazz, and Adam Silver shuts down the NBA on Wednesday, March 11th. I flew home on the 14th to LA. On the 16th, there were a lot of us, 6 constituencies, discussing the possibilities of accelerating our post-production. It was Netflix and ESPN, our dual distributors, Jump Inc., which is the Michael Jordan company run by Curtis Polk and Esty Portnoy, the NBA and all of the partners, myself and my partners at Mandalay Sports Media, and Jason Hare, the director, and our 5 editors. And they said, we need to get this out as soon as possible. LeBron had tweeted to his 85 million followers. There was a real clamor on social media, which of course I didn't know because I'm not on social media, but so I heard. And it really became a question of how soon can we get it on, but how about when can we actually finish the show in order to have finished shows and not rough cuts on the air? And it really became a math problem. Jason went back with the crew and we did all of this figuring out rough cuts and color correction and graphics and mixing and all the things that we were only about halfway done. We had about 4 or 5 episodes still to finish. And we figured out it would take until this week we're in now, the 3rd week of May, before we'd finish. So we back timed. We said, if we're going to do 2 a week, the last 2 need to be May 17th. We back timed to April 19th as the debut. It came on, it, smashed all kinds of crazy records. They originally announced 6.1 million viewers, which when they calculated in DVRs and so forth, more than doubled to 13 million viewers, which is, but you said the word buzz, Larry. It's more than the numbers. It's that you wake up Monday morning and there's like the post-game show.
Right.
They're deconstructing, they're analyzing, they're playing back the quotes, they're arguing. It's look, we were really grateful to be able to do it, to have people thank you, to say, we appreciate you bringing our family together and giving us something to look forward to all weekend. And it's humbling. And at the end of the day, look, it's the pandemic and the transcendent fame and magnetism of Michael Jordan. So we're thrilled.
That's awesome. What does I don't think most people know what a producer does.
No, not that. Not that question.
Explain what you did and how you did it, and how you walk us through like the mystery of bringing something like this to the fore.
Well, I'm going to spend a minute in honor of my deceased dad. Rest in peace, Sal Tolan, who Larry knew, by the way, very well. We compared dads and the insanity that they subjected us to, but the love we had for them in spite of it all. My dad couldn't figure it out for the life of him, year after year. What do you do? And what's that title mean? I finally came up with a nice, simple explanation that he bought, and I think he took happily to his grave, which was, a producer turns no into yes. So in this case, Michael Jordan had turned down the opportunity to release the Last Dance footage that was shot in 1997, 1998, the last of their 6 championship seasons. Turned it down pretty much every year for almost 20 years. It got to 2016, and I stuck my nose into the tent and said, gee, if I do the math right, we're 2 years away from the 20th anniversary. Maybe that's a compelling enough argument to kind of bring the band together again and try to release this thing. I think there was a reluctance on the part of Michael to allow the world to see the warts and all behavior that we've now all seen, the way he treats his teammates in practice. There have been a lot of words used to describe him. I don't need to echo them here, but let's just say he's tough. And he does not spare the rod. And these guys get the brunt of it. But my pitch, it was multifaceted. But I think the thing that really prevailed in a lot of ways was that the documentary landscape has come to us in a way that makes this much more viable and much more palatable for you, Michael, and for your team. Because whereas it used to be, less is more, make a documentary short and snappy and get out, 90 minutes, 100 at the most. Now, all of a sudden, people were consuming long-form, multi-part documentary series. OJ Made in America had just premiered at Sundance the month before, 8 parts, 450 minutes. Netflix had premiered How to Make a Murderer, 10-part documentary that took the world by storm. And HBO had The Jinx, the Robert Durst special. And I said, look, over the course of 10 episodes, we can show really what you're about. We can see the motivation. We can see this is about elevating your teammates, about getting them to share your intensity and your will to win. And people will understand it and it will feel justified. It's interesting that we're having this conversation this week after everybody saw him break down and damn near cry. He got so emotional just describing, the director Jason asked him a great question. Does it bother you that, people think you're an asshole and it gets in the way of people thinking you were a nice guy because of the way you treated your teammates and the way you behaved? And he was so torn up by it. And he desperately wanted to be honest, which he was. And you just see him, ultimately say break. And we go to black, and that's the end of the episode. But I think, look, he was 53 at the time we went to him. He's 57 now. He's got a new family. He's got 2 young twin daughters. He's been out of the game for almost 20 years. I think the proof's in the pudding. When you see the way he answers questions, he's leaning in. He's not evading. Like he was really great at it during his career. He'd smile, platitudes, give the guys a couple of sound bites, and they'd go off happy and then realize he didn't say anything. Now he's really saying it. Now he's not pulling any punches. There was nothing off limits. No question was, avoided or denied. I think he was just at that stage in his life where he's really ready to open up. So, just feels like right time, right place.
I think that no question was not engaged by him is a critical point. I don't know if you saw Ken Burns's critique. I'm sure you did. But so he said, first of all, he made the cardinal sin of criticism, right? He made a criticism, but then he said he hasn't watched a second of the series. Well, right, to me that invalidates criticism. Right. But his point was that I wouldn't watch something that Jordan had a hand in shaping. But what you just said is, and what I think is plainly evident from watching it, is that he engages every controversial, he answers every controversial question that has been raised about him over the years.
I'm not sure, far be it from me to defend Ken Burns, but I'm not sure if he said I wouldn't watch it or I wouldn't make it. He said I wouldn't do that. Of course, some cynics said, of course you wouldn't. You couldn't because you haven't done any shows about people who are alive. I'm not sure if that's very fair, but it's funny. But he said it's not good journalism. It's not good history. That's my business. Right. Okay. So he wouldn't do it. He also, and it's important and fair to say this, he got Jason Hare's number, a director's number. He called him and he apologized. He didn't apologize for what he said. He apologized for the context in which it was presented. He acknowledged he hasn't seen the show. He acknowledged that he's heard great things about it, and he acknowledged that he can't wait to watch it. And he just felt like it was an overzealous reporter who took it out of context, looking for some criticism. And his point was just, I'm not going to make that deal with my subject. Now, back to your point, we went after the gambling. We went after the events surrounding the death of Michael's father. We went after the conspiracy theories. We went after the activism or lack thereof embodied in the famous quote, Republicans buy sneakers too. Michael didn't shy away from any of it. We did the best we could. We asked everybody. We must have asked 24 people about the conspiracy theory that David Stern told Michael to go away for a year and take care of your gambling debts. I mean, as Costas said, not a shred of evidence. As Michael's biographer said, can you imagine David Stern, the ultimate capitalist, just taking away his primary asset and devaluing the team and the league that much? Didn't happen. Where we really knew it, Larry, was in the first interview when Jason read something in which the early Bulls, Michael's rookie year was 1984, the Bulls were not very good. And Jason said in the early days, the Bulls were described as the flying cocaine circus. And Michael cracked up, showing that he'd never heard the quote before. And then instead of, sloughing it off and say, that's funny, that's silly, next, he got right into it. And he talked about knocking on the door and describing the debauchery in front of him in great detail. So we kind of knew he was in all the way in. When Michael's in, he's all the way in.
Well, and you also had a prominent screen presence for commentary was Sam Smith, the writer who wrote the Jordan Tell-All book back in the day, and Todd Boyd, my guy from USC, who had back in the day written a lot of critical things. So there were. This is not one of the things that I like about it is it's not hagiography. It actually feels journalistic.
What I love is people discussing, let's say, the Jordan Isaiah feud. Right. This is not. It's really, I heard Stan Van Gundy on the radio this morning, sort of defending the Pistons because he's got some background with the team and all. I love that. And I think Michael probably welcomes that. He's critical of Scotty, talks about Scotty being selfish, not getting his surgery earlier. And he's critical, obviously, of Scotty's decision not to come into the game with 1.8 seconds left, down by a point against the Knicks in a playoff game. I think we feel really great about that. it's the only way to do this after all these years, especially, the audience is smart. And I think because of your audience, because this is a civic group more than a sports group, I believe. I'm sure there are a lot of sports fans, but that's not really the principle that brings everybody together. It's important to talk about how the 80s and 90s were so different than where we are now. I mean, nowadays, the guys warm up in layup lines with a T-shirt, that has a slogan on it. And then that gets played on social media. Guys are much more issue oriented. They're encouraged to take a stand and use the platform. Back then, and Sam Smith, the guy you mentioned who wrote the Jordan Rules, talks about a tacit agreement. They're trying to build the NBA. This is Magic and Bird, and then passing the baton to Michael. And it was kind of like, let's stay out of politics. Let's just stick to our knitting. Let's play ball the best we can. We're trying to get these games on TV, trying to get them broadcast live. This is a time when the NBA finals were on tape delay, in the early 80s. Right. So it was just a consciousness. And Todd Boyd says that very, very clearly. It wasn't what he was about, and it wasn't what athletes did back then.
Todd Boyd, who was Vernon Maxwell's RA, resident assistant at the University of Florida at Gainesville back in the 80s. Just a little bit of sports meaningless trivia for you. I want to get to these questions because everyone wants to talk to you about this, but I actually think that The Last Dance is the least interesting thing about you. So I wanted to
thank you very much.
I wanted to just touch on a couple things. One is you mentioned that the citizen exists about to trumpet civic life, and in some ways, I think sports does that better than what brings a community together more than sports. But I also you're very driven to be philanthropic. What is PACE, and what is the Philadelphia component of PACE?
7 years ago, 2013, I had an epiphany. It sounds good. I don't really know if there was a lightning bolt or not, but I was moved to start talking to some like-minded friends of mine, people who were in a position to do good after doing well professionally in their life. It was an early group of 6 and then 8, and now there's 12 of us. And I was describing my goals to my daughter, Georgia, then 20, now married and 27. And as I described it, she said, so it's kind of like some philanthropy and community engagement, PACE, philanthropy and community engagement. So Georgia's the author. She gets credit for that. And what it evolved into is sort of a roving board, strategic board, advisory board. We do 2 retreats a year in different cities around the country, in which we go into a city, we vet the community, get as many opinions from local experts in the nonprofit world about who's doing good things, who's impacting the community, who's been really effective. We engage with them, we share our goals, they tell us what they do, and we try to either scale them up locally or replicate the program elsewhere. Kind of things we've dug into are adoption, after-school programs, a little fancier term, social and emotional learning. There's an organization called Wings we found in South Carolina that was in 2 schools locally, and we brought them out to California, and they're now in 21 schools. Previously incarcerated young men and women, Anti-Recidivism Coalition. We got 3 of the major studios to agree to paid internships for young men and women getting released from prison, these are hungry people, and these people have made incredible workers, and we've launched some careers, and it's something we're really, really proud of. Something called Upward Roots, which is a youth-led service projects, on and on and on. But obviously, from what I'm talking about, as you'd expect, our focus is disadvantaged youth, education, families. You're smiling. Somebody's writing something funny, I guess.
No, go ahead.
But I'll keep going. So in getting to Philly, we came and we did a weekend retreat in Philly, and the dear departed Dave Montgomery was kind of our host. And I was talking about something that we encountered in Los Angeles called College Match, in which they take inner city kids of color who are impoverished and first gen, nobody else from their family has gone to college, and somehow find a way to intervene in a way that allows them to not only get into four-year colleges, but also like elite schools. These are kids going to Stanford and Ivy League schools. And we came to Philadelphia, and Dave said, you should really meet the people at Philadelphia Futures, an incredible woman named Sarah Woods, who's become a good friend. We met with her, we talked about our goals, and we've put together a cohort now of 20-some kids at Northeast High. Tough timing, because we just adopted them starting in the fall, and of course their big spring trip to visit all the colleges was at least postponed, if not canceled. And it's been really hard to these kids are being educated digitally and virtually, and it's tough to get the SAT training. And we're going to stay with them, and they're going to be fine. They'll come back next year, and we'll adopt another class that'll be juniors next year. But it's really it's heartwarming to get to know these kids, to see how appreciative they are, to see what kind of impact we have. So I think increasingly, as you get to the advanced age that we are, these things become more meaningful, right? I mean, this is real life, and these are real lives being impacted, and to the extent that the stories we tell, kind of help us, open the avenues to have impact in those other worlds, then it all works together.
And that, and we'll get to the questions in a minute, but I also.
What were you laughing about? You going to tell us?
No, it wasn't about you. It was about the shine off my bald head, actually.
I'm glad I am.
Hell if I'm going to do makeup. I'm in my home office, but it's not coincidental that you're on a spiritual path, right? I mean, this for that sounds a little too precious, but you and I both partake in you more than I, in a sangha every week. Again, you show up a lot more than I do, but I just think that you're on a path of self-realization and actualization, and that plays a role in your work, doesn't it? Or it informs your work in a way.
Well, I like to listen to my heart, professionally as well as personally. And then I try to search a little deeper and get to my soul. And so there's heart and soul. Try to imbue my work as much as possible. It's not always as prevalent. There are a few things we've done through the years, like Chasing the Dream, in which we started a foundation for underserved kids with Hank Aaron. The movie Radio, where we portrayed a life on the margins, a mentally challenged young man in South Carolina, and that led to all kinds of foundation support and really saved a life and empowered many others. I mean, that's really gratifying. The reviews are nice and box office is wonderful, but what lasting impact, what sort of real life impact? The spiritual thing, we have a mutual friend named Pat Croce, who's on his particular spiritual journey. He leads a group on Sunday mornings. It's really a wonderful way to start a day. And it's really about kind of finding a level of unattachment, recognizing that, there's what we do and that there's who we are, and they aren't one and the same. It helps me not get too high in the good times or too low in the tough times. This is obviously both. It's really a hard time for all of us. As I've already said, we're tremendously grateful to be able to provide something to pick everybody's spirits up. We'll just keep rolling along and seeing where it takes us.
That's terrific. Let me go to a question here. And you've talked about this, but there's more specific question here. And how much editorial control did Michael have? Did he have final cut? And did he have anything to do with his then wife and children being invisible from the film so far?
I think it's no, no, and no. He did not have final cut. He did not censor or cut anything out that we, the filmmakers, put in the cut. The only real specific impact he had in the final product, for which we were very grateful, was there are a couple times where he suggested adding something that we wouldn't have known was significant to him. For example, in '95, when he came back after baseball, He came back. He played that Indiana game where he was really rusty, which we showed this past weekend. And then we would have jumped right to the double nickel game where he scored 55 against the Knicks in the Garden. When he saw that cut, he had one of his guys call us and say, the guys should look at the footage from the Atlanta game, which is my 5th game back, and I hit a game-winning shot at the buzzer, and that gave me the confidence, without which I never would have had 55 in the Garden. So we put it in. How great was that? When he said yes to me and he shook my hand and he said, let's do it, I'm in. I said to him, I've done this a few times with a few different people in many different ways. So like, are you going to be like Hank Aaron, who basically said, I'll see you at the premiere? Or are you going to be like Kareem, who wanted to know everybody we were interviewing, wanted to see every foot of the dailies, pretty much over our shoulder the whole time. And he goes, oh, I'll be way more like Henry. I'll be way more like Hank Aaron. And he was true to his word. I think like I said, I think this was a cathartic exercise for Michael. I think he really enjoyed it. Jason was prepared, so he had the credibility. I mean, and Michael knew, that he was talking to somebody who had earned the right to get his attention. He couldn't have been a better partner, honest.
That's awesome. And by the way, is it true, for this quick question, then we'll go to Kristen, is it true that Spike Lee was in the running and you beat Spike Lee out for this project?
Really. In the almost 20 years, the names of directors who, quote, circled it and might have been the one include Spike Lee, along with Frank Marshall, along with Danny DeVito, and several others. So I didn't beat him out. I just, as I said earlier, I got there at the right time.
Well, and we should say that Frank Marshall is in your PACE group, right?
Yes, he is. Great guy.
Let's welcome. I love this technology for this reason. Let's welcome Kristen to the conversation. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, nice to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for picking my question and letting me come into this. This is so cool.
Yeah, thanks for coming. What's on your mind?
Well, one, I sent like a slew of questions because this has like been the only thing getting me through quarantine. So thank you for putting this out there into the world. But I guess I'll ask the one that I kind of think is most important. But what was the most challenging part about this project? And then also, what's the most rewarding part about this project?
Challenging was kind of herding the cats, if you know what I mean. There were so many constituencies, and it was such a high-profile project. It got so much scrutiny, and there was, as I've already recounted, kind of 5 or 6 entities. Everybody had an opinion. By the way, everybody had a valid point of view. So it wasn't like we were discounting everybody. We were listening to it. And it just made it harder. It's like moving an aircraft carrier instead of a little rowboat.
Yeah.
Water, right? At the end of the day, I think we feel really good about the consensus that we were able to reach. In answer to your question earlier, Larry, about Final Cut, I don't really know who had it. I always say, if you have to go back to a contract to figure out who has Final Cut, you're in bad strait. Anyway, we just kept working it. I think the most rewarding is like people like you saying what you're saying. I mean, how incredible, people thanking us. I mean, this is what we do for a living. You always hope, that people are going to like your work and respond to it. But to have this level of, community outpouring and at a whole different level, what's really cool is when people thank us and say, I can't believe like my whole family, waits on Sunday night. It's appointment viewing. And I start thinking about, what do you know? It's like old school. We're going a little backwards. There's sort of a negative effect about binge watching because you're never at the same level with your friends and family who are watching the same show, but they're 2 shows ahead or they're 2 shows behind. Now it's like you got those 2 and that's it. And if you haven't watched them, you're not going to be in the conversation Monday morning. So it's sort of the return of the water cooler culture, which makes me feel really good.
Kristen, did you have anything else?
No, I was going to say I think what you're saying, like that monoculture, ever since like Game of Thrones ended, I was like, oh, there's not going to be anything like that again. And this has kind of shown that glimpse of,
that's great.
I think everyone I've talked to has watched this or is in the process of watching it, which is great. And I love binge watching, but as someone who's obsessed with TV, I do kind of like that week to week where you can really deep dive into it, which is great. And then one other follow question, then I'll let other people talk. But if you could make a documentary on any fictional sports team, who would it be?
Sports team.
Yes.
Well, there's some that are so obscure that they're like fiction. Does that count? Like I was just talking today about the making of Ironman. There's a wonderful book called One Shot at Forever about a high school baseball team in 1971 with the backdrop of the Vietnam War. This tiny little school. Do you remember the movie Hoosiers, the basketball film? This was a baseball Hoosiers. They're the Macon Ironmen, and they're this tiny little school, like could barely get 9 guys out to field a team. And they went all the way up to these big schools with thousands of kids and won the state championship. And the coach was a guy named Lynn Sweet, it was kind of like Dead Poets Society. He was an English teacher more than a coach, but they had nobody else to coach the team. Read the book. It's called One Shot at Forever. It's amazing.
I will definitely read that. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you, Kristen.
Good to meet you.
Great questions. What's the name of that book again?
One Shot at Forever.
One Shot at Forever. Here's an interesting question. Can you explain your thought process when finding a director? And what about Jason convinced you that he was the best choice?
I'll tell you what convinced me. This is what I have to say first of all, because Larry knows this. I have a word, which I love, which is a Yiddish word, which is beshert. It's spelled many different ways. I like B''S-H-E-R-T. I think if you looked it up, it might come up B-A-S-H-E-R-T. It means a lot of things. It's like shalom means a lot of things too, right? But simply put, it really just means what was meant to be or destiny, okay? So I believe in that. When you adopt a child, as my wife and I did, now 21-year-old, 6'1" strapping Lucas Tolan, when you adopt a child, you realize how many things have to not happen, how many things have to happen, all to conspire to bring you this soul who belongs to you. In picking a director and in a lot of things in life, you just kind of look for signals. I mean, you want to use your head, but again, back to your heart, back to your soul. So Jason and I go to a Mets game at Citi Field. Where else to have a business meeting, but down the third base line at a ballpark. This is before the nets down the foul lines were extended. Okay, that's been a safety precaution that's been adopted by all 30 teams in Major League Baseball. But back then, they just kind of covered the area around home plate. We were sitting above the dugout on the third base line, and a foul ball came whistling between us so close and so fast that we heard the whistle, and we turned to each other. We couldn't speak for a minute. I mean, truly rendered speechless, heart pounding. There was kind of a moment of realization where I thought, if we survive that, we're kind of meant to be together on this thing. Okay, now the head part of the equation. Jason had done several 30 for 30 documentaries. The one I liked the best was called Fab Five. This was a film about the University of Michigan basketball team. He made the Fab Five with the most fab of the five absent. Chris Webber refused to participate, and he made a stunningly entertaining film, overcame that obstacle, told an amazing story. He made a film about the Bears. He made a film about Andre the Giant. I saw in him a guy who was clearly talented, also at a place in his life, early 40s, where he was ready to totally immerse himself in this material. It reminded of me how I was approaching the Hank Aaron film, which was 20 some years ago, pretty much did nothing else for a year and a half. This turned out to be more like 2.5 for Jason, but totally all in, put his heart and soul into it. And I think clearly the finished product shows we made the right choice.
You're talking to us from your home in LA, and it makes a guest appearance or a number of guest appearances in the series. So give us a little inside scoop. How many of those interviews took place in your actual home?
Well, we got a really good location fee, as in zero. Every little bit helps. John Sally, James Worthy, Todd Boyd, David Falk. I might be missing one or two. but it's nothing in this room. This is a den, and what's behind me, I don't know if you can tell, I don't know how out of focus it is, but those are radios. Not because I made a movie called Radio. It actually was a collection I started well before the movie. It was just a coincidence. I used to go to flea markets on Sunday mornings with my wife, and she would be shopping for God knows what, and I just would gravitate to old radios. I think, Larry, you can relate to this. I think it's because I grew up listening to baseball games on my transistor radio, often hiding them under my pillow with a little cord, attached to my ear, and then the radio under the pillow. I always love radio. It reminds me of, the early days. I loved driving in a car and trying to pick up a baseball game on the radio from a faraway city. It might be really scratchy and almost inaudible, but there was a challenge in that. So it's just a collection of mine.
I lost your picture, but I can hear you fine.
Could I refresh? Because you're frozen. Should I try refreshing?
Yeah, why don't you try refreshing?
Okay.
And we'll see if...
So audio is still working, but picture...
Yeah, although, okay, now Mike's reconnecting. And if there's anyone else who wants to come up on screen, let us know, or let Shadman know.
How's that?
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
All good. All good. Before we get, hopefully maybe someone will come up on the screen, but before we do that, quick question to you. This is what I really wanted to talk about. So you're a student at Stanford University. You somehow finagle a press pass to an Oakland A's game, and you go up to your childhood hero, Dick Allen. What is said in that first meeting? And then tell us about the next project in the Tolan oeuvre.
Oeuvre, please, Larry.
Oeuvre.
Second syllable. Come on. That's the only word in French I speak. Are you sure the people on this little Zoom here want to hear that first encounter between me and Dick Allen?
Give it a shorthand. I love it. So, yeah.
Dick Allen was a boyhood hero, for the first significant African-American sports superstar in Philly. Will Chamberlain might have come before, but the one that really stole my heart. He was playing out the last year of his career in Oakland. He was notorious for not being very amenable to the inquiries of the media. I was technically media, although unpaid, working for, as a stringer for a radio show, working for the student newspaper. I went up to him, I put a microphone in his face. I asked him an inane question, and he did exactly what he was notorious for. He ignored me. So I went back out of the clubhouse. I put the tape recorder away. I untucked my shirt. I messed up my hair. I put on a jacket. I went back in as if I was a different guy and hoped he wouldn't remember. I said, "Hi, Mr. Allen. My name's Mike Tollin. I'm from Philadelphia. I just wanted to say hello." He said, "Oh, you're from Philadelphia? Oh, I'm sorry about that, young man. Sit down, have a beer." And the rest is history. We became great friends. I've been shooting film for 20 years. We hope he's going to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame this year. And we hope to have a movie coming out in the next couple of years. And that one will really be from the heart.
I think you left out one exchange, which he said to you in that locker room, didn't you?
Many exchanges. I was trying to move it along. But, you're the chosen people?
Yeah. Okay. That's my favorite part.
He said, "What are you, Jewish?" And I was kind of like, didn't hear that. He asked me again, "What are you, Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah," not knowing whether that would be the end of the conversation or something to move it forward. And he looked at me right in the eye and he said, "Well, all right then, God's chosen people. Have another beer."
I just love that.
You know what it's like to be oppressed, he said.
That's right.
Okay.
Let's go to Toby. Hi, Toby. Welcome.
Yeah, hi. I would like to ask, what was it like getting Isaiah Thomas in on the documentary?
Well, it's interesting. It was not hard to get Isaiah. I didn't do the interviews, as I've already said. Our director, Jason Hare, did all the interviews. But Isaiah was more than willing and more than open about it. He has now kind of talked about his regrets in not shaking the Bulls' hands after they lost in '91. He comes across as very sweet and agreeable. You wonder why so many people don't like him. I mean, there's a large consortium of elite NBA players. You can speculate. I've been asked to speculate. Jason's talked about it, chapter and verse. Why wasn't he on the Dream Team in '92? Was it Michael? You can listen to David Robinson. You can listen to Charles Barkley, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. Those guys didn't want him on the team. It wouldn't have been as much fun. They wouldn't have had the same camaraderie. He's now kind of acknowledged that he has regrets and he wished he would have shaken their hands, but it's almost 30 years too late, man. So, he's not our favorite guy, but I appreciate his candor, and it's led to some really great, post-game discussion.
Yeah. Well, he's a great player. Yeah,
he's a great player. Well, like Michael said, as much as I hate him, I put him into Magic Johnson as, point guards in NBA history. So that's saying a lot.
Yeah. Also, I did see what David Robinson said about him. So it does sound like a lot of people did not want to play with him.
Yeah. Too bad. Great player though. Great player. Those guys were rough, huh? Watching that footage from those years, can you believe how rough they were on the Bulls?
Yeah, the game's changed a lot.
Yes, it has. How many would Michael score a game now? Could do 40 a game.
If James Harden could score 36 a game, I think Jordan could score at least mid 40s, low 40s.
You don't remember this, but maybe you're in Philadelphia, right? Your parents maybe could tell you about the year that Will Chamberlain scored 50 a game for a whole season. Did you know that?
Yeah, he averaged 50 and 26 rebounds, right? Something like that.
And he also averaged over 48 minutes a game, which means he never fouled out. He never came out of a game. He played every minute, including overtime. So much for load management, huh?
That's right. Thank you so much, Toby.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
it. And that was while Will was commuting from New York. He lived in New York and was driving to Philadelphia for games. He also said to Alex Hannum, his coach, today's media would have a field day with this. On game days, I'll come to the arena once. You can have me shoot around, or you can have me for the game. Your choice.
That sounds like a little like Richie Allen, doesn't it?
It does. And getting back to your Dick Allen project, I so am looking forward to this because tell us about it's really what the theme of it is, because it's really about growing up and having heroes and figuring out your way. So this is going to be a very personal film, I believe.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be in this one, whether I like it or not. Kicking and screaming. We've shot a lot of footage together. It's about hero worship to some extent. How and why do you get attached to somebody? I think it's different now. Certainly in the sports world, guys are free agents, and it's really rare to have an athlete play his whole career. Actually, Richie Allen, as we called him early on, ended up playing for Philadelphia, St. Louis, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia again, and then Oakland. So he traveled around a bit. But it was an incredibly strong attraction. And to go from having a hero to having him become a friend, and a support system for each other. We both had tragedies in our life that we shared on a very primary basis with one another. It's about race relations. In the 60s, there was a mayor in Philadelphia named Frank Rizzo, and it was a very polarized world. The police was kind of a police state. It was a little bit of a fascist regime. Tough times. And he bore the brunt of it. He had been brought up through Little Rock, Arkansas in the minor leagues, and he was the first black player in not just the city, but the entire league. Had to suffer rocks being thrown at him and windshields being broken and tires being slashed. And he just kind of played defense and became very, enshrouded and in mystery. And they thought he was being arrogant. He was just shy and defensive and trying to survive. And so it's about how public perception is so different from reality. I think who he is as a man, God-fearing, respectful, great dad, great son, is so different. And if people only knew, he would have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago.
You know, he was a cultural touchstone and a countercultural icon before there was any money in it, before there was any marketing potential to it. He was just sort of, you say he bore the brunt. I think that in the in the mid 60s, where you stood on Richie Allen then, Dick Allen later, could tell others everything they needed to know about you. If you were sympathetic towards him, you were opposed to the Vietnam War, right? It really is. He was this barometer for the times. And I love that you're, we've been talking about this for 20 years. I love that you're doing this project.
Yeah, I dealt with a lot of these themes and doing the Hank Aaron documentary. We talk about Jackie Robinson opened the door, and then the next generation had to bust it wide open. It wasn't always so easy. It was still segregated in spring training. Couldn't stay at the same hotel. Couldn't eat at the same restaurants. When I showed the Hank Aaron film with Richie Allen to a boys club in Germantown, and he left, and I went, "Oh no! What did I do? What in there was insulting?" I went out and found him. He was in his car, and he clearly had been very upset, maybe even crying. And he said, I just couldn't watch it anymore. That was my story. You're telling the story of a whole generation, first that generation of African-American players. So, you look at The Last Dance in the 90s and you see where we are in 2020, and we've come a long way. We have a long way to go, but it's not without some strides forward. I think we need to acknowledge.
Well put. Let's see if there's one last question for you here that, here I gotta ask you this. Can you go into more detail about what it was about your Iverson documentary and Jordan's appreciation of it that seemed to be the final deciding factor for him to greenlight the project?
Okay, so I'm glad you said that, because I've told this story in a few places, and there've been some head scratching, huh? So let me just acknowledge that this may all just be in my head. It may have had absolutely no impact whatsoever on Michael's decision to say yes. But all I can do is recount the facts and tell you the chronology and what actually transpired in that room. So I presented what we call a lookbook, which is basically a written presentation. I did not know whether I'd ever actually get to meet Michael in person. I'd been courting him and working toward a meeting for about 4 months. And Esty Portnoy and Curtis Polk, who were his partners, finally liked the materials enough and entrusted me enough to invite me down for a meeting. Took a red eye, flew to Charlotte, didn't really have a meeting, but they were hoping, that he would find a half an hour in the schedule. He finally did. It was the day before the draft, and he was in the war room, and they said, "Look, this poor guy flew all night to meet you." So he said, "Bring him in." Couldn't have been nicer. Welcomed me in. The Cavaliers had just beat the Warriors the day before, coming back from 3-1. That was the year the Warriors broke the Bulls' record of 72 wins and then lost in the finals to the Cavs. We talked about that. He was rooting for Steve Kerr because that was his old teammate. Just a little small talk, and then he took the book, and the first page was a letter I'd written to him, again, not knowing whether I'd ever actually get to present in person. I wrote him a letter. "Dear Michael, every day kids walk into my office who work for me wearing your shoes, who've never seen you play. It's time." He put on his reading glasses, okay? So there's a moment where Michael Jordan puts on reading glasses. Well, he's 53 years old, I guess. Okay, he's human. And he starts going page by page by page, reading every word, laughing at some of the quotes, admiring the pictures, getting sort of nostalgic. "Oh, I remember that." Small talking with Curtis and Esty. And the very last page of the presentation, as is customary, is your credits. You use your posters. And so there's Aaron and Kareem and Varsity Blues and Coach Carter and whatever else. He's kind of going around the page, and at the bottom right-hand corner was the Iverson poster. We made a documentary with Alan called Iverson. And, in Philadelphia lore, there's a famous moment where Alan did a little crossover and got the better of Michael, and I thought, oh no, this was so close. This was going so well. He points to the picture of Iverson and said, "You did that?" And again, like with Richie Allen 20 years ago, I was kind of like, yeah. You did that? Yeah, really. And he starts to take his glasses off and get up from around the desk and says, "Watched it 3 times, made me cry. Love that little man." Shook my hand, said, "Let's do it." So that's the chronology. Whether Alan was the closer or just, the cherry on top, that's how it went. I prefer to give Alan all the credit.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking this time, but also for doing this at this moment in I know it was serendipitous, but as you and I talk about, nothing ever just happens. And I'm one of those who is, looking forward all week to watching this thing, and the other thing I want to share with people is, and I've said this to you personally, that one of the things I've learned from you the most over the years is that no matter how busy your Hollywood mogul life gets, I've never met anyone who works on his relationships more. It's something I'm terrible at. Always keeps in touch with people who matter to him. It's really, we've talked about this, and you don't think it's a skill. I think it's stunning how you make time for people. So I want to publicly thank you for that, even though I fail in living up to your example on many levels.
I'm sure there's some people out there who don't agree with you or will go, "What's he talking about?" But to me, it's just, it's anything I'd say would be a cliche, but it is what makes the world go around. And especially at a time where we really aren't allowed to have a community, you realize there's nothing more important.
Let's close there, because that means something, as opposed to sports, which actually does mean a lot to both of us.
Community, right? And other sorts of community.
That's right. That's right. I can't thank you enough. I'll see all of you folks, or hopefully all of you folks, next week when we've got 3 of these. So thanks again, citizen community, and thank you, Mike Tollin. And we'll be. Do you want to give us a preview?
Sure.
What we're going to see this weekend?
Okay. No spoilers. I'll just give you one thing from each of the 2 episodes. In episode 9, as we're getting close to the end, in the last dance, we're going to give you another little gem. You've seen the backstories of Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, and Phil Jackson, along with a lot of Michael. Sorry, there goes the landline. In episode 9, we get the backstory of Steve Kerr. And those who know there was a tragedy in his life, which he overcame. Steve we talked about social and emotional intelligence earlier. He has it more than almost anybody I've ever met. It's a very touching scene, which includes his mother, who is incredibly elegant and articulate, and able to talk about this tragedy openly. And in episode 10, about in the beginning, again, back to discussions about a spiritual path. In the very beginning, you see Michael with his headphones on the way to practice before the finals, and he's listening. I won't tell you who, but Mark Vansel, his biographer, chimes in again about the incredible mindfulness, the incredible presence and ability to focus of Michael. And so you realize the impact Phil Jackson had on him. It's not just the body, but also the mind and the spirit that made him the player that he was. And it really made an impact on me. It's great stuff.
Awesome. What a great way to close the merging of mind, body, and spirit, which is what you're all about, despite your aching back.
Right.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, citizen community, and we'll see you next week. Thanks
Larry. As always. See ya.
See you, buddy.